So let's talk about El Raval. If you've ever looked into visiting Barcelona, you've probably heard of it, and you've probably heard wildly different things. It's this neighborhood right in the city's heart that people seem to either love or, well, fear. So what's the real story? Is it this amazing, vibrant cultural hub, or is it a dangerous place you should avoid? That's what we're going to get into.
Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll tackle that split personality head-on. Then we're going to rewind the clock and see how it went from an industrial backwater to a global hotspot. We'll look at the real price of all that progress and see how the very idea of civility was used to police the streets. Then we'll zoom in on what it's actually like to live there, and finally, we'll see why this is very much an unfinished story.
All right, part 1, Barcelona's contradictory heart. This really is the central mystery we're trying to solve. How can one neighborhood be seen as both a must-visit cultural hotspot and a sketchy no-go zone at the same time?
And you know what? This picture says it all. You don't even need to look at the data yet. You can just see it. Sleek, renovated, gentrified apartment buildings sitting shoulder to shoulder with older, crumbling facades. It's the story of two different worlds, literally on the same street, trying to exist together. And this split personality shows up everywhere online. You've got comments like this one from Reddit painting a picture of a paradise for visitors. The rest of us will revel in the great food, nightlife, and bars. This is the El Raval of tourism brochures, right? It's exciting, it's cool, it's the place to be.
But then you scroll down a little bit and you see this. A warning, just as passionate. OP should avoid Raval at any cost. You don't want to live in a neighborhood where you can't walk freely at night. I mean, wow, it's a completely different universe. So how did we get here? How did one place become two completely different realities?
To figure that out, we've got to go back. That brings us to section 2, from grime to grandeur. Because to get the Raval of today, you have to understand that this wasn't an accident. It was a very deliberate, targeted transformation of a forgotten part of the city.
So here's the quick history. Back in the 1800s, Raval was the industrial engine of Barcelona, full of textile factories. But by the middle of the 20th century, those factories closed, and the neighborhood fell into serious decline. Then, after the Franco dictatorship, Barcelona started to reinvent itself. But the real game changer, the moment everything shifted, was 1992, the year the Olympics came to town.
And this is so key. The Olympics were never just about sports. The sources we looked at call the games the perfect alibi for a massive citywide modernization project. It was the excuse, the justification, to pour in huge amounts of money and completely rebrand Barcelona for tourists and international investors.
And that leads us right into our next section, the price of progress. Because when you talk about urban renewal and progress, you always have to ask, progress for who? There are always winners and there are always losers.
The word for this, as you probably know, is gentrification. And it's a tricky one. On the surface, it sounds great, improvement of an area. Who doesn't want improvement? But the catch is, in the second half of that definition, it almost always results in the displacement of the original residents who can't afford the new, improved neighborhood.
And here's the reality of that pressure in hard numbers. Just look at this. From 1997 to 2015, housing prices in Barcelona skyrocketed by 150%. 150? Meanwhile, people's wages only went up by about 35%. That gap, that massive gap, is where people get pushed out. It's simple math.
But this change didn't happen evenly across the neighborhood. Check out this map. Researchers split Raval into 4 different zones, and the pie chart showed just how different each one is. You can see in Zone 1, the blue slice for gentrified services is huge. But then you look at Zone 4 and it's a totally different story. Way more workshops and services for immigrants. This wasn't a blanket upgrade, it was laser-focused. Now this graph might look a little complicated, but it shows the speed of the change. It's tracking those 4 zones in just a single year. Look at that purple dot for Zone 1. See how far it jumps towards that gentrified services corner? That's not natural slow change, that's transformation on hyperspeed.
So, if we lay it all out, you've got the two sides of the coin. The wins? Sure, you got shiny new cultural centers. Some beautiful old buildings were restored, and there was more investment. But the costs were steep. Rents that nobody could afford, local shops replaced by tourist traps, a feeling that the neighborhood was losing its soul, and a growing gap between the rich and the poor.
Okay, so you can't just change the economics of a place without also controlling the social side of it. And that brings us to Section 4, policing public space.
This is where we see how the very idea of civility was weaponized to enforce this new vision for El Raval. To do this, the city introduced something called civility ordinances. Basically, these were zero-tolerance rules for public behavior. They created a whole new set of things you could get in trouble for, all under the umbrella of being uncivil. So who or what was considered uncivil? Well, take a look. Begging, street vending, washing car windows at traffic lights. These weren't violent crimes. For a lot of people, these were ways to survive. But in the new, polished El Raval, there was no room for visible signs of poverty. And this quote from a sociologist at the time is just incredibly telling. He defined the uncivil as anyone who is socially unbalanced, no matter how good a person he might be. Think about that. It stopped being about what you did and started being about who you were. Poverty itself was seen as an imbalance that needed to be fixed, or more often, just hidden from view. So, we've seen the history, the data, the policies. But what does all of this actually feel like for the people who live there day in and day out? Let's zoom in to the street-level view of this divided neighborhood. We're coming back to this map of the 4 zones, because the experiences of people living in these different colored areas can be like night and day. We're going to compare 2 of the most different ones.
This table just lays it out so clearly. Zone 1, up near the big modern art museum, is over 50% gentrified services. It has the highest land value, and people there generally feel like things are improving. Now, look at Zone 4 in the south. It's dominated by old workshops, has a way bigger immigrant population, the lowest land values, and people there feel like the area is actually getting worse. It's like they're not even in the same neighborhood.
And this lines up perfectly with what people say online. You have someone who lived in an area like Zone 1 saying it's a pretty calm area with plenty of amenities all around. That's the clean, safe, renewed version of Raval.
But then you hear this story from someone in one of the other zones. They talk about police raids in my street every single week, junkies sleeping inside the building, a massive narco finca, which is an apartment used for drug dealing. This isn't just a slightly different perspective. This is a completely different world, shaped by where you happen to live within this one small neighborhood.
And that brings us to our final section, an unfinished story. Because the most important thing to understand about El Raval is that this isn't over. It's not a success story, and it's not a failure story. It's an active, ongoing battleground for what the future of Barcelona and cities everywhere should look like.
Which really leaves us with this one big question, and it's a question that goes way beyond Barcelona. When we talk about a city being reborn or revitalized, we have to ask, who is it really for? Who gets to enjoy the new version, and who has to leave to make room for it? That's the heart of the matter, and in El Raval, that story is still being written every single day.